Hi everyone and welcome to HDF 390. Today we'll go over some introductory information that will provide you with the foundation for this course on global families, and hopefully it will set you up as a way for you to think about families in the different countries we will be studying, and will also help you to be able to make comparisons between them. By the end of this course, you should be able to identify similarities in families across countries, as well as the uniqueness of each. So we can see here that we have different types of societies, typical definitions, and also the societies that will be highlighted in this course. And this way of describing societies is based on economic systems, or the way goods are produced and distributed in a society. So just to give you an example, maybe some of you have been in Old Salem, in Winston-Salem, about 35 minutes away from Greensboro, and maybe you have seen how Americans lived before the Industrial Revolution. So there is people grew their food, they ate, and crafted by hand the items they use, such as clothes and utensils or farm tools. And so the people you will learn about in some of these countries are like that, except that they live in the rainforest, or they farm to produce food, and some hunt and gather. However, there aren't many of these societies left in the world. At the other extreme are post-industrial societies. So, for example, Japan is this country we will study. But if we think about it, the United States is also one. So many of you have experienced or maybe know people who lost jobs when the textile industry left North Carolina for places overseas, or maybe the auto industry has also declined in the US. And instead of manufacturing, the areas of growth have been in technology, communication, and other information services and finance. The other two categories of societies are experiencing is a variety of adversities as they develop, such as Kenya, Mexico, the Caribbean, or because of major transformations. For example, thinking about Russia, South Africa, China. And these difficulties will be outlined as we study each country. So we will be studying a lot of information about each country to understand the context where people live in. And these are the types of structural, or also called macro, factors that make up the context of any country. But what is uniquely important to each country is different. And part of what you will be asked to do is to identify those contextual factors in each country that are especially influential on family life. So, for example, some of the contextual factors we will be talking about are population, the urban-rural ratio, type of government, ethnic diversity, religion, history, economy, and the Human Development Index, or also called HDI, that includes life expectancy, infant mortality, and other indices. In order to provide some continuity across the families in all the countries we study, we will focus on these three things: family structure, gender roles, and the division of labor and socialization practices. So the rest of these slides will describe in more detail what we mean by these three aspects of families and how they are changing. This is a very important slide, and this chart is also included in the materials on Canvas, and we will use this chart a lot during this class, and you should keep it in mind while working on your assignments. We talked already about the context, and now we're gonna move to talk about the characteristics of family life, including family patterns, gender roles, and child socialization. So when we talk about family structural patterns, such as the one included in the slides, traditional, dual earner, or modern and postmodern, we're basically referring to the typical classification for families in Western societies. However, in the non-Western countries that we will be studying, extended and multi-generational families are the norm rather than nuclear. We need to keep in mind, however, that families are always changing, so there is not one type of family for all time. Global transformations accelerate this, and the more the world changes, the more families change as well. These categories are also arbitrary, and this means that they are made up to help us make sense of family structures. But not all families fit nicely in these categories, and there are always exceptions. And so family structures are changing all over the world, and here are some of the reasons why. The industrialization, educational and economic opportunities for women, aging population, and also globalization. So look at each of these changes and think about how they have affected family patterns. So for example, thinking about where people live, when they married, how many children they have, who does what in the family, maybe who lives together. And in spite of the fact we will be studying families in countries across 4 continents, these type of changes are occurring all over. So now we will focus on gender roles and the division of labor. Across the planet, patriarchy, which means male dominance, informs gender roles. That is, that the attitudes and behaviors of males and females in families. So traditionally, men are providers, right? And this is what we will refer as productive labor, and also decision makers. However, women are usually viewed as the ones that take care of home and children, and we will refer to this as reproductive labor. So the assumptions about male and female roles are much more resistant to change than other aspects of family. However, there is some evidence that this type of family values are declining. So we will see traditional gender roles throughout this semester, yet we will see some examples of that changing as well. Here you have some examples of these changes in gender roles, attitudes, specifically talking about the decline of authoritarian patriarchal family values. So, for example, an increase in premarital sex and earlier sexual activities, a decrease in arranged marriages, and an increase in number of women in labor force. And these changes at the same time have led to higher expectations for role sharing, less hierarchical relationships, and lower paternal authority by children. Finally, we will also be learning about socialization practices. And here is where we find the huge difference between Western and non-Western societies in their worldview. That is, whether what is important is the individual or the group. So, for example, in Western societies like the US and other European countries, they believe in the individual. And so we promote the idea that individuals alone are responsible for their success or failure, and we encourage people to look out for themselves. So for example, think about the US. We want children to achieve their full potential. We want the children to become independent members of society. And so the success of a family is seen in terms of its individual members. And again, thinking about the US, this is especially true for white families and less so for Latino, Asian, and Black families. On the other hand, non-Western cultures emphasize what is good for the group. This applies to the family, the community, and the society. And so while individuals are important in these societies, individual well-being is secondary to well-being of the group. Therefore, as an individual in one of these cultures, I will have to relinquish what I want or what I think is important for my growth or success to benefit my family. So again, ethnic minority families in the US are more likely to hold this view as well. And so, for example, white American families, more than any other ethnic group, use nursing homes for elderly parents rather than caring for them at home. So again, thinking about looking at the individual instead to the group. And so these different worldviews influence how children are socialized, and we can see that in the socialization practices that we just talked about and that you have in your slides as well. And there are forces that resist change, as well as forces that encourage change. And this slide shows resistance to change. So we have here stability, that signifies that things stay the same. So for example, staying married until death. Then we have homogeneity, which means that things are all alike. So for example, if no one divorces in a country. And then we have patriarchy, that refers to social systems in which males have authority over women and children. And so religion, social norms, and the economic dependence of women all encourage stability, homogeneity, and patriarchy in families. So maybe now you can try and think of examples of how these factors influence the families you know. And so I will give you one example. There are some religions that teach that men should be the head of the household, which is reinforced by social pressures and leads to women's economic dependence, right? And so often families in which men have power over women are families in which women are more economically dependent on their husbands, which means there are fewer divorces and also less diversity in family structure, or using the same terms we've been using, more homogeneity.